President Biden speaking live at the White House right now. This is a press conference called on short notice. The president making brief remarks and taking a series of questions from a very animated press corps. A lot of cacophony in the room, but the president doesn't often take questions at live press events. And so making news there, including right up until the last moment. Chris Hayes, I actually want to go to you on that. The president's remarks on Israel there at the end, going some distance further than he has previously in terms of describing what's been happening in Gaza.
He was about to exit the room. He came back to answer a question specifically about Israel. So he wanted affirmatively to talk about it. He used the phrase over the top to respond to characterize the Israeli campaign in Gaza. He had used the word indiscriminate to describe the bombing in a private event, in a fundraiser. And this was by far the most forwardly critical of the Netanyahu government's approach in Gaza. He has been on the record and in public. He talked at length about the reporting that we've seen, that there are intense talks for negotiations for an exchange that would essentially be a pause or ceasefire in hostilities in exchange for hostage releases, the hostages to be released. This is the latest iteration of the deal. Benjamin Netanyahu rejected yesterday in a long speech that he gave both to the Israeli public and then in English publicly. But he clearly is pressing on that. He's pressing on humanitarian aid. It was very interesting. It was the most striking pivot the president has made in public in his criticism of the Netanyahu and Unity Cabinet, war cabinet's management of the war effort in Gaza.
Also talking about the timing of the Hamas attack in Israel and what was going on diplomatically. And he said, I have no proof for what I'm about to say, but it's possible that this was not coincidental in terms of why they timed their assault the way that they did. Lawrence, let me go to you in terms of the basis for this press conference and the basis for the president's quite strident remarks at the top, rebutting not the central conclusion of Special Counsel Robert Hur's investigation into the president's handling of classified information. The central finding, of course, is that President Biden should not be charged for anything that he did, but rebutting forcefully the way that Robert Hur explained his reasoning in that case.
Well, yeah, especially this line that the president quoted where the report refers to him as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. What is the word elderly doing there? And poor memory, what is the test of that? Might that be Donald Trump saying, I don't recall 400 times under oath in the same deposition? Is that a good test of it? The idea that witnesses over a 40-year discussion don't remember everything, or that someone who graduates from college in June can't tell you where the diploma is in September. That seems to be a condition that this special prosecutor doesn't understand in the human mind. So I'm going to be fascinated when I can get into all these hundreds of pages to see what is it that makes you stress the lack of memory in this particular case, where you have this completely cooperative witness, and there has never been a witness under oath anywhere being questioned over a period of years of that witness's life where they don't say, I do not recall. It is impossible to ask witnesses questions where they answer will not be, I don't recall. And if you don't get that response, it just means you didn't ask enough questions.
Can I speak just on that? Because I had the same thought. It's fairly standard lawyering to advise people, even when in doubt or you think you might remember. If you can credibly say, I don't recall about something, that's a standard legal advice. And it has nothing to do with the age of the person giving the deposition.
When you're under oath, you can't lie. If you do recall, you have to say that you can. But if you can't.
Exactly. Well, that's the whole point, right, Rachel? That basically, because of those standards, the extra burden that you don't want to get anything wrong means you err on the side of saying, I don't recall and I don't remember, unless you really specifically do. And if there's a thing that might seem minor and you're not sure and you're being asked about a very specific aspect of it, like, was it in the morning, that meeting, or was it in the afternoon? And you had that meeting that day and you've even refreshed your notes. I don't recall what time of day. And it's, oh, my gosh, you're 25 and you can't tell the morning and night apart? I will tell you this because we're going to get into all of it. But the president came out and spoke tonight because, on the one hand, he has very good news. This exhaustive investigation led by a Trump-era holdover prosecutor cleared him of the wrongdoing on classified documents.
No charges.
Cleared him. No charges. End of story. Case closed. Good news. But he has a political piece of bad news woven in there, which is what seems like cheap shot, derogatory attacks on him, which I wouldn't call normal course of investigatory material. And so maybe Mr. Hur would be better suited going for a job as White House physician. but he'd have to go and get a medical degree, too, because legally there's no interest or relevance to his views of the president's overall memory. If it's very specifically to the mental criminal intent or mens rea, and you say you couldn't have this criminal intent and you didn't remember this, you didn't mean to do it, sure. But talking about how, for example, the president remembers or discusses his son's death and Mr. Hur and his team's apparent view that tells you something. As soon as I saw that today, I thought, wow, that's a real partisan kind of tell in a report that has a good news legal headline.
And the president just showing absolute rage at that point tonight.
There was one adverb in particular that struck me, which is painfully, which the author of this report, presumably Mr. Hur himself, uses. The president his memory was painfully bad, or
it was some of the tapes they heard were painfully slow. The discussion was painfully slow.
That's right, painfully slow. And I just thought, well, who's in pain? Like what? That adverb is it's doing so much work editorially. Well, you're in pain because it takes too long. Like, it's just very clear, just contained in that adverb is this kind of like siren call that's leaping off the page about him understanding exactly how this is going to resonate.
A little political footnote to special prosecutors. What should be noted here is this is a Democratic president being investigated by a Republican special prosecutor, which, prior to Donald Trump, is the way it's supposed to be. When a special prosecutor was investigating Donald Trump, it was a Republican.
Correct.
He's the first one who got someone from his own party as his special prosecutor. And Trump thinks that's the way it should be. And if you're a Republican like Robert Mueller and you're not a Trump Republican, he thinks that's unjust. Trump thinks the only people who should ever be allowed to investigate him, if he's ever going to be investigated, have to be real Trump Republicans. This is the old-fashioned way. You get a Republican to investigate the Democrat, and this is a product of a Republican who then turns over cards to show that he's kind of a wise guy partisan Republican.
Yeah. I think there were a couple of things that kind of struck me. Number one, you talk about the timing. It kind of brings together what you were saying and what you were saying is that he also noted at the time he was being questioned, it was shortly thereafter, after the October 7 attack. So he was a little focused on some other things, right? He had a lot on his mind. So he was saying that he's being questioned, and that is one of the reasons that he might not have remembered every detail. But the point that Lawrence is making, I think, is true. A lot of people have asked why there was a special counsel to investigate Donald Trump. The Justice Department could have simply investigated Donald Trump, who was no longer president of the United States. But it took 3 years to get those cases online and on board because there was this need to have a special counsel for the former president. This actually made sense to have a special counsel. He's the sitting president of the United States. But then to the sort of snark of it, it's only on page 1 that the special counsel describes Mr. Biden as sort of self-involved. He's long seen himself as a historic figure. And they start out by saying he believed his record during decades in the Senate made him worthy of the presidency, and he collected papers and artifacts related to significant issues.
Crazy that they put that in the report.
Yes. And that's actually page 1 and 2. So they start out with a snark. Right.
Yeah,
and
with
then
the executive summary, that's like, if you're only going to read one thing, let us tell you that this guy thinks he's really important.
That he thinks he's important.
He is the president of the United States. He saw it coming, and there's something wrong with that?
And they start by saying he's very self-involved and thinks he's the most important guy. And then by page 6,
kind of the most important guy.
Right. They say, but we don't think that he would be convicted because a jury might empathize with him because he's a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. So it really is sort of, it's nasty and snarky for no reason.
So